Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Raymond Yeung. Here are tonight's top stories. China abandons zero COVID at long last as Beijing announces a raft of easing measures. In Hong Kong, residents can sign up for Omicron booster shots from next week. And U.S. President Joe Biden hails the return of American manufacturing at an unveiling ceremony for a chip plant. In a major policy shift, China has eased a raft of COVID restrictions aimed at restoring the battered economy. Patients with mild symptoms can now choose to quarantine at home, while negative PCR results will no longer be needed on public transport. Janice Low reports.
Authorities may not openly admit it, but China is finally dropping its zero COVID policy. The State Council in Beijing has issued a directive on how COVID measures will be optimized. For the first time in 2 years, COVID patients will have the option of isolating at home. Asymptomatic patients or those who experience mild symptoms will now undergo home quarantine for 1 week. Close contacts will need to isolate for 5 days only, down from 8 previously. COVID lockdowns, which had seriously disrupted the economy and supply chains, must be implemented in a more precise manner. Instead of sealing off entire buildings, local authorities can lock down certain levels of a residential block. Mass testing will be conducted at a smaller scale at reduced intervals. Priority arrangements will be implemented to encourage elderly citizens to get jabbed. Less than half of those aged 80 or above have received a booster jab, while only 60% of them are fully vaccinated. Unlike many other countries, inoculation remains voluntary on the mainland. Travelers no longer need to produce a negative PCR result or a health code to get on public transport or enter most public venues. The only exceptions are schools, hospitals, and elderly homes. Authorities would not say if they dialed back the measures only after nationwide protests in the past week.
We believe that they would be able to better cope with the new features of the COVID-19 new situation, as well as based on the mutations of the virus, so that such control would be more scientific and precise and more operational and targeted.
The significant step towards normality came as infections on the mainland continued to decline. But cases remained relatively high, with 25,115 local infections. Janice Low, HKIBC.
Back in Hong Kong, adults will be able to receive a 5th COVID jab starting from next Friday. Anyone above 18 who had received 4 doses more than half a year ago can sign up. They can choose Sinovac, BioNTech, or the new bivalent vaccine. Also known as the Omicron booster, the bivalent vaccine will be available to adults as a 3rd jab as well. This comes as new COVID cases in Hong Kong has surged to an 8-month high at 11,981. 22 more people infected with COVID have passed away. The government is proposing stiffer fines for littering and other related offences, saying current penalties lack deterrent effect. Under the scheme, shops encroaching onto pavements face a $6,000 ticket. Macy Mock reports.
With an agenda to clean up the city, the John Lee administration has earlier identified hundreds of hygiene black spots for follow-up action. Now, the government is turning its attention on individual behavior. It is proposing to increase the fixed penalty ticket for littering offenses, which it says lacked deterrent effect after remaining at $1,500 for 19 years. The problem is especially common at wet markets, where stalls illegally extend their shop fronts. Under the proposal, shops in breach of the rule will be fined $6,000, 4 times the original amount. This is a major deterrent, says this vegetable hawker in Chunwan. He explained there was no way he could break even if he was fined $6,000. A local district councillor welcomed the move.
Residents have been very dissatisfied with the old situation, which lasts for more than 10 years or even 20 years. They have had enough. Shop extension is a bad habit. It's against the law too. This situation should come to an end.
But he noted the situation has already improved after recent law enforcement operations. Authorities said action must be taken after the number of complaints against shops encroaching onto pavements jumped by 57%, reaching 23,500 last year. Those who are caught illegally dumping construction waste on the streets could also face a fine of $6,000. Over 2,000 tons of heavy waste were taken off the streets last year alone. Meanwhile, the government also proposed a $3,000 fine for other offenses, such as littering, spitting, displaying posters without permission, and not cleaning up after their dogs. Dog owners who repeat the offense now face a fine of $25,000 upon second conviction instead of $10,000. Lawmakers are set to discuss the proposal next Tuesday before an amendment bill is tabled in the second quarter of next year at the earliest. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
A man who allegedly stabbed a police officer last year had died of self-inflicted wounds, the coroner's court has ruled. The attack, which came on the 24th anniversary of the city's handover, was later described as an act of domestic terrorism. Joanna Ho reports.
After a 5-day inquest, the coroner's court has ruled the death of a man who allegedly stabbed a police officer outside Sogo department store in Causeway Bay as a suicide. In a case which shocked Hong Kong, Leung Kin-fai turned the blade on himself after his knife attack on July 1st last year. He was certified dead in Rattnji Hospital that night. As the inquest drew to a close this morning, Coroner David Koh told the jury they could either rule his death as a suicide or return an open verdict. Citing the official autopsy report by forensic pathologist Lam Wai Kwok, Koh said there were 2 penetrating wounds on Leung. They injured his heart and caused massive bleeding, which could be fatal. It was also revealed in court that USB drives which belonged to Leung contained letters detailing his criticism of police during the anti-government protests. Police psychologist Vince Ho and Amos Cheung, vice president of the Hong Kong Psychological Society, also testified earlier. Ho said Leung was an idealist who could have suffered vicarious trauma and regarded himself a victim after reading news articles about the demonstrations. Leung wanted to voice for the protesters and believed it was a noble act to commit suicide due to his extreme obsession arising from his withdrawn personality, Ho added. Cheung said Leung felt he was unfairly treated by society after an unsuccessful career. That sentiment and other factors led to his binary thinking. The jury of 2 men and 3 women unanimously ruled that Leung had killed himself. The 50-year-old's family did not turn up today. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
The government denied making compromises in safety and structural rigidity after the average cost of a public rental unit dropped by 1/4 over the past 5 years. DAB lawmaker Lau Kok Fan wanted to verify claims that the cheaper the units, the less durable they will be. In response, the Housing Bureau said on average, a public rental flat cost $650,000 to build last year, compared to $860,000 in 2017. The latest price tag is even lower than the estimated cost for so-called light public housing flats, which are meant to be no-frills and economical. Housing Secretary Winnie Ho also confirmed a 2011 consultancy report, which stated that public housing blocks built after 1992 boast a general life cycle of 100 years. Overseas, U.S. President Joe Biden announced American manufacturing is back after striking a deal with the world's largest semiconductor company to build a second plant on U.S. soil with a total investment of $40 billion. Katrina Lau reports.
In a sign of the factory's importance, U.S. President Joe Biden and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo flew across America to personally inspect its construction progress. Biden was then greeted by Cece Wei and Mark Liu, Chief Executive and Chairman of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. The world's leading manufacturer of semiconductors is now constructing a plant in Phoenix, and there are plans to build a second facility. The total investment of $40 billion is the largest single foreign investment in the history of Arizona state. Touted as his blueprint to revive the economy, Biden has rolled out aggressive policies to lure technological investments and manufacturing back to American shores.
This state-of-the-art facility behind us is a testimony that TSMC is also taking a giant step forward to help build a vibrant semiconductor ecosystem in the United States.
The biggest names in tech, including Apple Chief Executive Tim Cook and NVIDIA boss Jensen Huang, also attended the opening ceremony.
And today, TSMC has announced a second major investment. They'll construct a second fab here in Phoenix to build chips, 3 nano chips, the 3 nano chip. Chips that are 3 nano, and you know what I'm saying. Nano, no, I don't know.
The new plants in Arizona will churn out the most advanced chips at the request of U.S. firms such as Apple, according to Bloomberg. The latest TSMC investment is seen as a major victory for Biden, especially as global economies race to secure supply of semiconductors and minimize the impact of logistical disruptions. Katrina Lau, HKIBC.
The real estate empire led by former U.S. President Donald Trump has been convicted of defrauding tax authorities. But Trump himself was not charged in the case, and the fine is not expected to be material. Azam Khan reports.
Longtime Trump Organization finance chief Alan Weisselberg was seen leaving the court after testifying at the trial. Weisselberg had previously pleaded guilty to hatching the 15-year scheme and became a key witness for the prosecution. Under the deal, the 75-year-old would receive a 5-month jail sentence. The guilty verdict came on the second day of deliberations in the only criminal trial to arise from the Manhattan District Attorney's 3-year investigation of the former president and his businesses.
A jury convicted Donald Trump's company, the Trump Organization, on all counts in its criminal tax fraud trial. Now, this case is a bit unusual because it stems from allegations that top executives working under Donald Trump, they concocted a scheme to evade taxes on their own personal income taxes. They were receiving perks from the company, apartments in New York City, luxury cars, other expenses being picked up by the Trump Organization.
A sentence will be handed down next month, with the Trump Organization facing a maximum fine of $1.6 million, a relatively slap on the wrist.
Now, of course, there may be some other ramifications. Banks might not want to work with them. People making deals might think twice.
The company has indicated it will appeal the verdict. While Trump was not charged in the indictment, experts say the district attorney's office in Manhattan is beefing up its investigation of the former president. Azam Khan, HKIBC.
News of the mainland dialing back its COVID regulations were unable to provide a spark in the Hong Kong markets, which fell for a second straight day. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed down by 626 points. To the top 10 active stocks, Tencent lost $11.60. The Tracker Fund was down by 60 cents, while Meituan was down by $6.30. Country Garden was down by 49 cents, while Ping An Insurance was down by $2.55. Finally, the weather. Fine and dry tomorrow as temperatures will range between 17 and 23 degrees. More of the same conditions over the weekend. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Wednesday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Raymond Yeung. Thanks for watching. Good night.